Good afternoon, everyone. All right. I am so glad that you have chosen to join us today for our second annual Stamping Out Suicide event. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Jim LaGraff. I'm the Executive Director of Encompass Community Supports. It's a position that I've been honored to have now for the past 6.5 years. So at this time, I would like to welcome to the stage Associate Vice President of Student Services and Academic Support at Laurel Ridge Community College. Please join me in welcoming Caroline Wood.
Welcome, everyone. I can't tell you how excited I am to see so many people here committed to this issue. And I know that your commitment and your energy today will help stamp out suicide. We are so honored to host this today and see so many of you here. So I am the Associate Vice President of Student Services and Academic Support, and that means that in my portfolio, we do work with students around mental health issues. And did you know in the state of Commonwealth, I'm always told it's the Commonwealth of Virginia, not the state of Virginia. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, it's not actually legal for community colleges to provide counseling. Luckily, a few years ago, they did enable us to use third-party vendors. So in the last couple of years, what we've done here at Laurel Ridge is use a telemental health provider called Timely Care. And that gives our students access to 24/7 crisis care. So they can have 24/7 talk, the counseling, psychiatry, health coaching, and all of those things right at their fingertips. And we have found that our students are so appreciative, and our students are one of the largest users in the state. And all of our faculty and staff are jealous of our students because they have access to such good mental health care. And we know it's critical in keeping our students safe. So anybody, just raise your hand. Is it your first time here at Laurel Ridge? Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. So we are at the Fauquier campus. We actually have two campuses, a Middletown campus in the Shenandoah Valley, and we have a small site in Luray. And this building is pretty new. This room itself brought to you by Joel Barkman and his family, if you've heard of Golden Rule Builders. So you can thank him and his family if you ever see them out and about for a space such as this. So I just hope you enjoy your day today, and please welcome to come back anytime to the college. We hope to host this for many years to come, and we're happy to help out in any way. If there are other activities or anything that you would like to partner with on the college, please come to us. We are fully supportive of our community and the mental health needs in our community, and I know so much good work is being done, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. It looks like some great events on the schedule. Thank you.
Next, I would ask to please come up Janice Riley, Board Chair for Encompass Community Supports, to say a few words.
Welcome to everybody, and thank you for spending your Friday afternoon, rainy Friday afternoon, with us here at Stamping Out Suicide. I'm Janice Riley, and I am so honored to be able to be the chair of the Board of Directors for Encompass Community Supports. I am so humbled by all the great work that our staff do every day throughout our 90-plus and probably growing number of programs. Thank you to all the many familiar faces of staff I'm seeing here today. About 3 years ago, information about zero suicide was shared with the Board of Directors. Research has shown that each suicide, up to 130 people are impacted. And we were amazed how many people on the board, how many people in the communities that we represent were influenced and deeply impacted by all these losses. So we all together accepted the challenge. Not just our prevention staff or clinicians, but all of Encompass throughout the programs, the board, and we received training in zero suicide. So fast forward 2 years, almost 3 years, we're here now at the second annual Stamping Out Suicide Conference. We're delighted to have you all partner with us too, to help us heal, equipped to make a difference, to help us feel that we're not alone, and to turn any grief that we have into a positive impact for our friends, our families, our coworkers, and our communities. So let's stamp out suicide. Say it with me. Stamp out suicide. One more. Stamp out suicide. Let's go.
The theme of today is creating hope through action. However, we all need to remember hope is not a strategy. We cannot just hope things will get better. We cannot hope members of our community who are needing help will get it. We cannot hope that the stigma associated with mental health will someday just go away. We cannot hope that our families and friends will never feel the pain of losing a loved one. We need to take action. Today is about action. As you listen to the presenters today, you will hear stories of healing, of empowerment, and those stories will give you hope. As I said, hope is not a strategy, but hope can be the fuel that allows all of us to take the actions that we need to take. Thank you for all coming out today. May all of you leave with the fuel needed to continue to help our community stamp out suicide. At this time, I would like to introduce today's keynote, AnneMoss Rogers. AnneMoss is a motivational mental health and TEDx speaker, author, suicide prevention trainer, and suicide loss survivor. Through her own personal experience of loss, AnneMoss uses her authenticity and know-how to teach and support others. Now, as an expert on emotional wellness, suicide prevention and postvention, as well as youth mental health, she speaks at conferences, universities, schools, and workplaces to help better equip her audiences, fill their hearts with hope, and ultimately save lives. Please join me in welcoming AnneMoss.
So I was told I was getting up here. I want to make sure that you all today understand that there's emotional content in my address. So we all have heard of 988, I hope, in this room. But if you hadn't, that's where you can call when you're worried about yourself, when you're worried about a loved one. Or maybe you're sitting there with someone who is struggling and you don't know the next step. You can call 988 and say, what do we do next? 741-741 is the crisis text line. And this is my son, Charles. Funniest, most popular kid in school. 6'1", 130 pounds, with clothing on. Yet the funniest and most popular kid in school struggled with depression, anxiety, and in 2015, he killed himself. He was the last person I would have ever thought would have taken his life. What I didn't know was that my son was struggling with a number of other issues. In this picture, he is walking with his favorite teacher, Miss Bretwell, and he's on homecoming court. I'm enjoying that day because it was a proud mama moment. Not that this was on my bucket list, but our family had been in chaos, and I just decided I'm gonna enjoy today. My older son actually won, and I think for a lot of people who are sitting in the stands, they were looking down at us and they thought, man, that family has it made. And nothing could be further from the truth. Because it wasn't long after that picture was taken that Charles's drug use started to escalate. I did not know why. I would find out later that Charles started using drugs and alcohol, marijuana, all sorts of stuff I'd never heard of, anything that was under the radar that would get through a drug test. He did that to numb thoughts of suicide I never knew he had. He didn't tell me. He was a master at hiding his depression. His father and I actually went to a counselor because we did not know what to do with him. And we went through all the local resources. Nobody ever did a psychological evaluation. We visited our counselor one day, and he recommended that we kidnap our son out of his bed and take him to a wilderness program. You don't do that because you caught your kid with a beer and a joint. You do that because you think your child's life is truly at risk. We were desperate. Would I do this today? I don't know. I don't know if back then it was the right thing to do. It certainly wasn't plan A. And as you can see from the picture, he did not enjoy being deposited in the woods in Georgia in the cold weather with no electronics and nowhere to go to the bathroom or take a shower unless he dug the hole himself. But this is where we got a psychological evaluation. No one ever said those two words to me, psychological evaluation. I kept asking for a diagnosis. Oh, don't worry about it. We'll just give him this medication. You go in for some kind of heart problem. Do they give you medication without doing the diagnostics first? They do not. So this is where we finally got major depression, anxiety, cannabis dependence, which means he was using marijuana to manage all of his problems, ADHD combined type, which we already knew about, and Charles also had a sleep disorder called delayed sleep phase syndrome. He wasn't able to fall asleep before 2 a.m. And I'm sure that played into all of his other issues and made everything that much worse. From here, they would recommend that he would go to therapeutic boarding school. Now, this step was really expensive. And what paid for it was my savings. I've been saving for 10 years to redo my kitchen. In 12 weeks, it was all gone. I would do that all over again if that was the right thing to do. And probably today I would do family-based treatment because I don't know that sending them off is the best thing to do. It's always really difficult to figure out what to do. So it's recommended next that he go to therapeutic boarding school. That's an even more expensive step that we can't afford because guess what? We didn't have a boarding school budget, but our home equity loan, it did. So he ends up coming home in 2014, having spent some 22 months outside our home in some kind of placement. Here's what I didn't know. Charles did not go and start using all the wonderful resources and new coping strategies that he had learned while he was away. What he did instead was go back to drugs and alcohol to manage and numb his issues, which is basically like kicking the can down the road. That little breadcrumb of that drug use led to a heroin addiction. I thought I was in between that. He's in the suburbs. Heroin will never get to him. When actually he was texting his drug dealer, they would meet him out in front in a car. He would snort it, which I didn't even know you could snort heroin. And he would come back in and he would sleep it off. All that happened at 2 or 3 a.m. 10 months, right under my nose. Eventually, he would tell me that he was addicted to an opiate. He would go to detox. He would go to rehab. And then he would go to recovery house. But once he landed at the recovery house, he lapsed within 24 hours. It was their protocol to take him back to detox. All he had to do was 3 days. But he wasn't ready for recovery. We were, but he was not. So he saw a friend, they walked out together, and for 2 weeks we didn't know where he was. Was he under a bridge? Was he with friends? In fact, my husband kept saying, he's with friends. And I'm like, I don't think so, but I'll I allowed him to believe that. We got a few texts, and we got a phone call that I didn't know was my last phone call. And then we got a phone call from the police. We were out to dinner one night, and we would get a phone call that they had found our son dead. So in the back of the police car, my husband in the front, I'm in the back. We're wailing and screaming, and my husband takes a break. And he says, "How did he die?" And I'm thinking, how do you think he died? He was addicted to heroin, for goodness sakes. And the policeman said it was a suicide and the method left no question. My first thought, how could I be such an awful mother that my child would leave me that way? But it's not about love. Love can't keep somebody stapled on the earth. I wish it could. And it took me a long time to understand why suicide. And I just studied it and became obsessed with it because I had to understand what it was that went on in his mind that caused him to feel like he was better off that we were better off without him. I would come home and write this newspaper article. Now, it took me 6 months to write 1,200 words. And forever, I couldn't figure out why it took me so long to write those words. And it was because I was processing the loss. One day, I'd be really angry, and I would open up that thing while I was writing on it and go, "Oh, wow, that sounds like a manifesto. That's not going anywhere." But it helped me process that anger, that sadness, that helplessness, all the emotions you go through when you're grieving a loss by suicide, that why, that self-blame. Not that I've got it all fixed by the time this published, but I did recognize one thing, that writing was helping me process this loss, and it became one of my chief coping strategies. So I turned this into the newspaper. I'm feeling great. Wow, this is amazing. And then they called to tell me they published it. And I start to have a panic attack. I have to pull over and start deep breathing. What have I done? What if no one ever reads it? It'll feel like I'm burying my child all over again. But instead, it went viral. So I started this blog called Emotionally Naked to find healing through writing. 3,500 blog posts, because I would write 2 a day, some in the middle of the night, to sort of process things. And then right before the first death anniversary, I would get up and I would write this post called The Final 48 Hours. And it was about how we got the news and how we reacted to the news. And when I hit publish, through all these tears, I felt embarrassed. Why am I sharing this with people? And then the next day when everybody came to the site and was reading it and it started to just blow up, I thought, why is everyone reading this? Why did I write it? And a couple of days later, I got a note from a girl named Lauren. She said, 2 days ago, I thought about taking my life. Reading a post from a mother who's felt such devastating pain has changed my perspective on life. And that was a turning point for me. Now, I want you to understand, had I been sitting across from Lauren and said, well, what about your family? She would have shut down. She would have felt like I had invalidated her feelings. Instead, this was an act of self-discovery, and by the time she reached out to me, she'd already decided to reach out to her parents. It validated what she already wanted to do. She wanted to tell someone, and my article merely gave her that permission. Then I wondered, how did my son know to put together his instrument of death? And then I realized he's no engineer. He Googled it. What could I do about that? Well, at the time, I owned a digital marketing company, and I did something called search engine optimization. What if I wrote an article with the title that I thought my son looked up on Google, and people came to that page, and it didn't give them instructions, but it gave them hope and resources? Would it make a difference? At first, it didn't. I got a few visitors, no comments. What could I do? I met with people. I didn't know a lot. I wasn't trained. I didn't feel qualified to put a lot on the page. So I started talking to AFSP. I started talking to counselors. And then I made a video. And I'm going to play that for you now.
Pennysicle.
And then I got my first comment. My own video. I finally got my first comment. And of course I cried. And then I've had thousands and thousands since. But I want you to know, I've never saved anyone's life. People send me that all the time. All I've ever done is help someone else save their own life. And that's really all any of us can do. So I've done this for so long, I now get people who reached out to me years ago, and they're older now, and they've worked through things, and they send me how they're doing now. I really love that. And sometimes they'll comment on the original video or just some video they found on YouTube or on the webpage. And some people are not all that happy with me. In fact, one kid said he was clickbaited out of dying by suicide. I thought, that's pretty good. So I have people who come to the site and make angry comments. I treat them with kindness and respect. Why? Because when somebody is struggling with thoughts of suicide, they're hurting and they may be angry and irritable, right? Lots of times I'll say, you sound like you're really hurting. Tell me more. And they come back and they apologize. I'm sorry, it was really harsh and I lashed out at you earlier, and they'll tell their story. And then half the time I never hear from them again. But I think it's really important to understand that anger and irritability is the result of somebody being in pain. It's really all about connection. We can all be connected with one another. And now we're going to take a closer look at suicide. Now, oftentimes we use the word committed, like it was a crime. And we want to stop doing that. 1300s England, yeah, it was a crime then. They wouldn't allow the family to have a burial or a service. They would donate the money that was inherited to the crown. But today we recognize it as a public health issue by the World Health Organization, National Institute of Mental Health, and the Department of Defense. So we want to say suicided, died by suicide, ended his life, killed himself. Those are appropriate. Died by suicide is what I use most of the time. So what do people who are thinking about suicide, what are some of the things they do? Now this is just one slide. I could have 50 slides. But this just encapsulates just a few of them. They ghost and isolate. My son did that at the very end. Drinking and drugging. He was actually doing the opposite, and he was going through withdrawal when he took his own life. So by the way, that increases risk. And that's why they take away shoestrings when people, go into rehab. Behaving recklessly. He definitely was doing that. Visits the doctor often. I knew the first name of every nurse of every school he ever attended. In fact, I usually knew that before any of his teachers, because that would be the first phone call I got. And she'd be, "Hello, Miss Rogers." Gives away prized possessions. Oh, back to the doctor thing. The reason they're at the doctor a lot is if they're depressed, their immune system can be down. That's one reason. The other reason is when you tighten up your muscles, you get headaches, you get backaches, you get muscle aches, right? So they're not psychosomatic, they're not fake. They are real symptoms. And giving away prized possessions is another sign. There are many more, but these are just the basic ones. So what do they say? "I'm such a burden. I can't do this anymore. I am so worthless. I feel so numb. I feel so overwhelmed." Worthless and burden being those red flag words that you really want to pay attention to. So what do you say? Well, it's not as much about what you say as how you listen. Because we can stop suicide with our ears. We just have to listen. We listen with thoughtful compassion. We don't fix it. We don't offer solutions. We use these. And every one of you have them attached to the side of your head. So what do you say? Tell me more about how you feel. You do not want to say, "You have so much to live for." Why? Because that's not where they are. We have to meet people where they are right now. We can't push them into the light. We can't use toxic positivity to make somebody happy. We have to allow them to feel heard. So when they say, "I'm so ugly and nobody likes me," you say, "Well, tell me more. Why do you think that?" And when they tell you why, say, "That must be really difficult to feel that way." So you empathize. You don't correct them. And then they feel heard. And then that mumbo jumbo all stuffed in their head has a chance to come out. I'm grateful you shared this with me. I know it was hard. Think about how difficult it is for somebody to tell the deepest, darkest, most difficult feelings that they have. That is a huge trust thing. They trusted you. You should be honored. You don't want to say you're just trying to get attention. Because when somebody is struggling with thoughts of suicide, what do they need? Attention, right? What are they going to do? Use smoke signals? So we don't want to act like attention is a negative thing. We want to give them the attention they need. And then here's what we want to ask. We want to ask, are you thinking of killing yourself, or are you thinking of suicide? And I'm going to count to 3, and I'm going to ask all of you to say that with me. 1, 2, 3. Are you thinking of suicide? Was that comfortable? No. Will it ever be a comfortable question? I've asked it hundreds of times, and I can tell you, I am more accustomed to doing it, but I am never 100% comfortable with it. I just know I'm going to feel uncomfortable, and I work through that feeling, because this is life or death. The teenager's always like, well, it might make somebody mad. I'd rather have somebody mad at me than dead, right? You want to engage in private conversation. Listen with empathy, no fixing. Ask the question, are you thinking of suicide? Then connect that person with help. You can text 988 in a group text together if you're on the phone with them. You can call 988 together and say, what is our next step? We don't know what to do. But you're showing partnership. And that's a lot better than being alone, right? I want you to trust your gut. Do not let your brain talk you out of what you know in your gut. Now I'm going to briefly touch on my grief journey. And I want you to know we were a normal family. And we did normal family things. We baked cakes together. We played slip and slide. We had birthday parties. We had bonfires. We had people over for spend the nights, birthday parties, family events. I coached basketball. My husband coached baseball. I was afraid to watch these little videos. There they were sitting on the shelf taunting me. Tell me to see how funny he was? I was afraid of them. But you know what I saw when I watched them? I saw that my son grew up in a house of love, that it wasn't something I did or said that caused him to suicide. And do you know what else I noticed? I recognized that I'd been hyper-focusing on the 5% of parenting I did imperfectly, ignoring the 95% I did right. And I want to know from all you all, do you do that in your professional or personal lives now? Most of us get in that rut every once in a while, or we stay there. And I realized I needed to move beyond that. So here's one of the errors people make. They go right into distraction when they have a difficult feeling. You need to feel your feelings because your pain has a purpose, and that is healing. It is the building blocks to emotional healing. So here was my sort of the way I dealt with it. I would get ambushed by grief, go to the floor. I spent a lot of time on the floor those first 3 years, curl up in a ball, scream, cry, kick the wall. That feeling, the intensity of any feeling lasts about 60 to 90 seconds. You can do that. And then it lifts. When it lifts is when you distract yourself with a healthy coping strategy. And that is not a glass of beer or a glass of wine. Writing, running, rock climbing. One kid at NC State said reading fart jokes. That's a great strategy. So whatever your healthy strategy is, think about what that is. This journey has taken me places I never thought I would go. And at times I've felt guilty about that. I was asked to speak at a TEDx. I was asked at the billionaire summer camp where the Apple CEO and all these media people are in my audience and I'm the one on stage. That was bizarre. And they wanted me to talk about teen suicide. First time this audience ever invited that kind of topic at Sun Valley. And then for the last 3 years, I've worked with NC State University. And I've been honored to be there so long and for them to call me, and I continue to train there. Then earlier this year, we did a documentary, finally came out after a year and a half, on after your child's suicide attempt. And it's from Zero Suicide. And that's because there's not much in that space. And we want parents to be able to hear from other parents as well as experts. We have a breakout later, and I do have one final story I'm going to tell you. But before we do that, I would love for everybody to take out that index card and write down one thing that you learned today. And I'm going to tell you why I do this. Because telling this story over and over can be difficult. And I've found that when I take these home and I'm about to have that emotional crash, I reach for the index cards and these notes you have written. And it reminds me of why I do what I do. So I'm going to let you shuffle around for just a second. And I'm going to tell you one last story. So there was this young lady, and her name was Danielle. And she came up to me about a year after Charles died. And I mean, those of us who've lost a child, whether it's suicide or anything else, we are starved for your stories. Her name was Danielle, and she said, I've suffered from depression since high school. And one day it was so bad I didn't even want to go. She said that somehow I got up and I went to school, and it was around fourth period. I'm standing there with all my friends. They're laughing and joking. They don't even notice I'm depressed. And she said, nobody sees me. And she looked up and she saw Charles staring straight at her. And she said, Ms. Rogers, everyone knew who Charles was. But she said, I didn't know he knew me. And we had never been introduced. All of a sudden he comes up, stops about a foot in front of her, breaks out into a rap song he created on the spot just for her. First, she and her friends are shocked, because who does that, right? He finishes the song. They die laughing. He bends down. He gives her a hug and says, pretty girl shouldn't look so sad. And he made his way down the hall. And I think as funny and as talented as Charles was, that was his greatest gift. It was letting other people know that they matter. And that's something that each and every one of us can do every single day. It costs nothing. Thank you.